All right, good afternoon. My name is Frank Webster. I'm a fellow with the National Association of Watch and Clock Collectors. And today I've been asked to share about tower clock restoration that I completed during COVID. And so we're going to talk about the history of the clock. We're going to talk about processes that I learned and that many people helped me with, and then the lessons that I learned from doing it. Okay? Before we begin, we're going to talk about a couple of terms. Whenever asked, can you fix my clock? I always say, no, I'm not a clock fixer. I'm a clock restorer. So restoration is an attempt to bring the clock back, or the mechanism back to its original condition. Before you begin any project, you have to think about the project scope. In my case, I had a tower clock, but I also had a lot of extras. Was I going to include those extras in my project? How far was I going to go to this project? So you have to think about the scope of it before you begin. I understand that some people say, leave it the way you found it. Don't mess with the patina. Don't refinish the case. Wait a minute. This is my project. I'm the artist. I get to decide. Now, if it's somebody else's clock, I truly recommend that you discuss with them your artistic view of the completion of the project. But in this case, everything that was done, I decided to do because this is my clock. But how many people here are fixers and how many people are restorers? Are you a restorer of clocks? It's good to communicate with your customers about what extent you want it done. I learned a hard lesson one time when I restored somebody's clock. And when I took it back to them and I hung it on their wall, they said, that doesn't look like my clock. Because I cleaned the face, I cleaned the case, it looked like it was new. That was not what they wanted. Okay, and the last thing before you begin a restoration project, I always look for inspiration. You have to say, why am I doing this? What's motivating me to get this completed? And for me, it's history. We're going to talk about the history of this clock. It was originally ordered in 1889 from Seth Thomas, and it was ordered by the U.S. Signal Clock Company, which has the address, and who it was marked to, or delivered to. It has the address. It's serial number 506. It says it on the clock keeper's dial. Seth Thomas would add the date and the serial number when the clock was sold. So when later you come up and look at the back of this dial, you're going to say, boy, somebody pounded the daylights out of the back of this dial. It's because they set it onto the numerals and pounded it until it made an impression in the dial. The U.S. Signal Clock Company was established to respond to a request by the city of Louisville to synchronize the police and fire stations that were downtown, synchronize their clocks. So a man by the name of George W. Grant and his buddy, R. Braun, he was a jeweler on Main Street. George W. Grant was a real estate agent. They decided they would order these parts and they would claim this contract. As it says here, they failed to perform, which meant whatever their idea was, it didn't work. The Seth Thomas Clock Company then 3 times in 1989 came to Louisville with a case against the Signal Clock Company because they were not paid. The order book from Seth Thomas, which you can look up in the National Association of Watch and Clock Collectors research section, has this clock listed, sold to these people, all of the parts that went along with it, and I can account for them all here on the table. And they got it on credit by the good name of George W. Grant. Seth Thomas wanted their money. So eventually they were paid.
How much?
The clocks typically sold that They were in the $200 to $300 range with all of the things. Okay, so what else was going on in Louisville at the time? There was the tornado of 1890. So we've gone from 1889 to 1890. And this tornado ripped into the Parkland neighborhood and did extensive damage to the elementary school and the Parkland Elementary School. It's mentioned, this author has written a couple of books about it, but when the tornado came through, it talked about it in its humor. It broke off a cast iron street lamp and planted it into the yard of George W. Grant. There's that name again. George W. Grant, without breaking the glass of the street light. He also mentions that in another book that he wrote about this tornado, about how it ripped into the Richland School in the neighborhood, and it was a landmark in that neighborhood. We go back to the Seth Thomas record books, and we find that in September of 1891, a 4-foot face was ordered. It was ordered by, oh no, not that guy. George W. Grant's buddy, the jeweler over on Main Street. He ordered it, and it was a 4-foot face. It was to have gilded numbers and gilded hands to match, and it was to say, presented by George W. Grant, right on the face. So it was taken in delivery, and it was paid for before it was delivered. And in March of 2013, Webster's Works, which is my company, we submitted a proposal to the contractors that were redoing this building. And my job was to restore this 4.5-foot face and then have it electrically run. Electric Time provided the mechanisms, controls for it. And I gave him a $1,000 credit for everything I found in the tower clock, in the tower. What I found was this clock and all of those components. So I think I got a pretty good deal. This shows an image of the face when I went to collect it. And then this is the restored face. You can see it has gilded hands, gilded numbers, and they're actually cast. They're cast in lead, the numbers, and then presented by George W. Grant was presented. It was also cast and then affixed in the dial.
Was it a wooden dial?
It was a wooden dial. It was 4 inches thick. Oh, wow. And so, with this historical inspiration, I said, I'm going to restore this tower clock. This is an image actually where it was mounted to the back of the face the day that I went to collect the face. You can see that it's sitting on a block of wood. There's a big timber next to it. It has universal joints at the top and a 90-degree turn, and it goes into the back of the dial. The dial shows the motion works on the back of it. And there it says, it has the crank handle still plugged in, ready to be wound. Now, you think, wow, that was great. Well, I didn't like to be the guy who had to wind this clock because you had to go up a 24-foot extension ladder, crawl through a escape hatch, low level across the building until you got to a place where you could stand up in the back of this dial. So the process begins. First thing I did was decided I had to take the junk, and it was dust, and it was fiberglass, it was grit from the masonry crumbling. And so what I did was I did a scrub down. I put the clock into a cookie sheet and used denatured alcohol and a paintbrush and started at the top and scrubbed it all down. When I was done, I started again. I went through 3 times the process. So then I could see what screws, what were rivets, what were bolts that could be taken out. So I could see what was necessary to dismantle the clock. So then I dismantled it. And people know that I don't just take things kind of apart. I spread them. I completely dismantled the pendulum. It shows the pendulum casing, the lead weights that are inside of it or somewhere else. The pendulum rod was bent, so it was listed in things that needed to be repaired. This is the crank handle taken apart, every screw, every nut, every bolt taken apart, and it needed to be repaired after, and some of you here saw it. The handle was like loose like this, like you wondered how long it was going to stay in place. The top of the pendulum shaft here, the picture doesn't really show it, but the hooks were bent up and they were also spread out. And then this is an image of the main wheel. I believe that the click let go or the weights broke off. Something happened with that handle plugged in. It let loose, it bent the shaft, it bent this shaft so that I could not take this unit apart. I'm thankful for people that have big vices on the end of their workbenches, and we took it to Sam Thornton's garage, tightened it up until we got it straight enough to take the bushing off so we could take it out of the plate. Later, when you come up and look at the clock, you're going to look at it, you're going to go, not only was it bent, it's twisted. So quite a bit of torque went into breaking this clock. The next process then was cleaning. So every part that's separated was then cleaned. The cast parts, I'm very thankful. Somebody said to me, my sandblaster as Sue sandblaster. The glass beads, stripped it down to the metal, it was primered, and then it was painted. Somebody asked me what kind of paint was used. This is Rust-Oleum Hunter Green. It's the closest to the original Seth Thomas green that is available on the market. Every gear, every piece went through sonic clean, ultrasonic clean, and then polishing. All of the brass components that are polished, all of the steel, all the rust was removed, they were polished out. All of the steel then was coated with a automotive wax. The brass was not protected in any way. I'm looking forward to it since I'm the owner, to it aging and gathering its own patina over the next 150 years. Then the repairs began. Some of the repairs was the suspension spring. I always talk about the National Association of Watch Clock Collectors Forum, because if you go there and post a picture, you are going to get all the help you can get. Because this was my suspension spring. It was broken. It didn't have any way of reattaching. I had no idea what size it needed to be, or all this. I had encouragement on how to calculate the size of the spring based on this being centered on the winding shaft. I had people tell me how thick it should be. I had people tell me how to affix the brass blocks. And after about 2 weeks of listening, suddenly there was somebody who said, "Oh, I have original Seth Thomas suspension springs. You want one?" So I was thankful. These are the counterbalance for the hands. When you come up and look at them, I will challenge you to take them apart. The originals, the counterweight, I have tried rust dissolver, I've tried ultrasonic, I've tried heat, I've tried banging it with a hammer, I've tried everything I could to get those weights so that they can move again. I had to just abandon that attempt. As much as I wanted to keep this all original, I then went to somebody who had a big lathe. I don't have all the tools, I don't have all the knowledge, but I have safety and a multitude of counselors, and I have lots of people that say, come by, bring the rod, we'll thread it. We'll bore a hole in the weight, we'll tap a hole so it can lock down, we'll do all that. It was a 2-hour, and I have beautiful counterweights, we'll see them up there now. In addition to that, the dial. I mentioned that the dial, the serial number was put on after it was sold. So that tells me the date it was sold. This is a tower clock that was designed by a man that actually was pirated away from E. Howard, who was ahead of Seth Thomas in making tower and public clocks. So his name is on the dial as well. Now, sometimes you run across things that you say, well, I could just send this dial to Charlie the Dial Fixer. That's a fictitious name. And he'll re-silver it for me, and he'll re-enamel the letters and all that stuff for me. Or you say to yourself, I could do this, maybe. I'll give it a try. Well, what I did was I went to Time Savers, and they sell a kit. And what I learned in developing this process of re-silvering dials and also enameling, melting enamel into the dial engravings was that you can do it. Somebody on the message board told me the secret is you use an ultrasonic cleaner with an ammonia-based cleaner, put it in, do it for 10 minutes, take it out, and all of the old silvering will go away. All of the old enamel will come off of it, and you'll just then have a brass piece. Polish it, and then yeah, you can do it. And so this is the before.
Well, that's the front of the dial,
That's
the back.
No, this is the front of the dial. It's as ugly as the dial was outside of the building.
Wow.
And this is the brass second dial. So some processes you can get help from friends. Some you can get recommendations from experts. But there are some things that you just say, I'm not spending that kind of money to have somebody else do it. I'm going to figure it out myself. This was one of the processes that I figured out myself. I mentioned the hook at the top of the pendulum. That was easily warmed, not heated, but warmed and reformed. The click, this is one of the clues that I had that I think the click failed. This click is supposed to be sprung against the flat arbor here. You can see there's a lot of spring missing out. So what I did was I took it apart again, I heated it, I reformed it, I then quenched it in 30-weight motor oil, hardened it again, and then, so now it's properly. This is the handle. My editor said that's not really a good picture, but this is the handle, and you can kind of see that this hole is not really round. And so what I did, what every good clock man knows how to do, I bushed it. First I made it round, I put a brass sleeve into it, then drilled it to the size that needed for the handle, and you're welcome to pick up that handle and you'll find that it rolls very smoothly and it stays aligned. It's not all wobbly and loose. So after all of the repairs were done, then it was time to put the parts back together. In some of the universal joints, when I took it apart, I found that it didn't have a shouldered screw, but had a wood screw. Wrong repair. But I used all of the original screws that I had. In the process of cleaning, all of the screws were then polished and re-blued with heat. But I reassembled as many of the universal joints and also the finger joints that link the components together. I rebuilt the handle, came all together. The pendulum shaft, after it was straightened, was reassembled. So I have sub-assemblies. And it's always a good day when everything finally comes together. Once all these sub-assemblies were done, the click, the continuous power spring, all of the pendulum, all of the universal joints and everything, it was definitely a good day when I put all the parts together and said, oh, it does look like a tower clock. So So that's the process that I went through to restore this. And I want to tell you, it was my COVID project. When you begin a restoration project, don't think it's going to be done this weekend. This project took me about 18 months to complete, and I wasn't working on other clocks. I was just doing this. I'm very thankful that there were people that allowed me to come to their workshops and into their buildings and stuff to help me complete this project. Yes, I put the weights on. The weights require 28 pounds according to Seth Thomas. I put 30 pounds of weight onto this clock. 3 bell bar weights, 10-pound weights. They stack up like pancakes, and it does work. I know there's still things that I need to do to complete this project. Some of you might have heard me say that I'm looking to trade the motion works that I have for smaller motion works so that I can drive perhaps a 12-inch dial instead of a 48-inch dial. It'll be easier and my wife will be happier. Okay. It went with the weights on, and with the height of this table of 48 inches, this clock will run for almost 2.5 days before it has to be wound again. I don't think I'm going to run this clock all the time, but it sure is going to be nice. Oh, there's people coming over, wind the tower clock, set the dial. If I have an external dial, I'll be able to set it also. But that's what I plan to do with this project. When you think about restoring a clock, remember, get inspired by the history. Remember, there's safety in a multitude of counselors. Remember the message board at the NAWCC, because there are a lot of people there with a lot of opinions who have probably been down the road before you. And remember, it's going to take some time. But that's what I wanted to share with you today. I'm thankful for the regional to give me the opportunity to share this.
Do you have any idea when it was broken or what was last running?
I don't know when it was last run. The Parkland School, they built a new elementary school right across the street, so they stopped using it. The school changed hands several times. It's now a place where single parents with children can have HUD housing, HUD supported housing, and they pay their rent by working. They turned the gymnasium and all into a big food processing place where they make meals on wheels. They make meals and stuff for the different shelters and all that stuff. So they traded some time in order to pay for it. It's a beautiful building. I don't know when it stopped.
You think how long do you think it ran originally on a line?
Oh, on a wind, I'm sure it ran for a week. Yeah, because instead of the cable coming down and just hanging, it went up to a pulley, and I have a pulley, and then it dropped down, and it would have given it the 40 feet, I think, that Seth Thomas says this clock requires to run for 8 days. Yeah.
Would you do it again?
Yeah, I do it every time I get a clock.
Okay, so you follow the same process, but on tower clock specifically, you do it on a tower clock.
Yes, I was not new to tower clocks when I started. I worked with a team of people and restored an E. Howard time clock that's on display at the L&N train station. Okay.
Very interesting.
And if there aren't any other questions, I'll be glad to answer your questions as you come up and look at these things. I encourage you, get the clock that you're inspired by its history to restore, and you decide, am I going to refinish it? Am I going to leave it as it is? I don't think this would have run if I left it as it is. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.